And with that, now I will actually move on to the meat of our presentation today. So I want to introduce our two Treasury staff that are here with us today. Vanessa McGaw is the Outreach Director for Emergency Housing Programs at the U.S. Department of Treasury, where she leads the program's engagement with participating emergency rental assistance and Homeowner Assistance Fund. Courtney Coffin is the Outreach Manager with the Emergency Housing Team at the Department of Treasury. She's an experienced public policy advisor skilled in management and policy analysis, community engagement, and financial empowerment programming. And I just want to point out to everybody that here we are with Treasury kind of seeking your input. Stacy taught with NHLP and I got together to put together a survey where we're going to get your information to provide to the Treasury, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is looking for your input. So I just want to point out how important these regulators see the work that you do and understand that you are the ones on the ground that are really seeing everything happen. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa and Courtney.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you so much for inviting us to speak today and for all of your efforts in helping the Homeowner Assistance Fund be successful. I am Vanessa McGaw. I'm the Outreach Director, as Ellie said. I joined the team in April of 2021, so it's been I've seen these programs be built up, move along, and now we're some of these programs are starting to wind down. And it's been a very interesting ride. So I'm going to be talking about the Homeowner Assistance Fund just generally, and about some of our efforts to learn from the implementation of the HAF program. Before I get, next slide, before I get too far, I do want to note that these slides are meant for educational purposes. For specific guidance related to the HAF program, please look at the guidance pages on their website, treasury.gov/HAF. All right, so now next slide. Let's talk a little bit about the HAF fund. You can go to the next slide as well. So Congress enacted the Homeowner Assistance Fund in 2021 through the American Rescue Plan, and the HAF award expires September 30th, 2026. So this is a discrete program. As you probably know, it is focused on helping low to middle income homeowners stay in their homes in the midst of economic, health, and other impacts related to the COVID pandemic. The program does this by providing financial assistance for mortgages, utilities, and other specified housing costs to help avoid displacement. So really important, the program was implemented by states, and you all know this, but just to remind you, states, territories, and tribes. So specific program designs and organizational partnerships depended on choices made by HAF program administrators at the state, territory, and tribal level. Next slide. And again, you all know this, but worthwhile reviewing: homeowners who are eligible for assistance experience a COVID-related financial hardship after January 21st, 2020. They have incomes equal to or less than 150% of the area median income, or 100% of the median income for the United States. And to be eligible for HAF, the applicant had to be a homeowner, and mortgage assistance could cover, specifically mortgage assistance could cover a variety of mortgage types, reflecting the diversity of homeowners that the program could assist. For targeting, program participants must use at least 60% of funds to go to homeowners with incomes at or below 100% AMI, or the US median income. to cover qualified expenses and prioritize remaining funds for socially disadvantaged individuals. So the next slide. Socially disadvantaged individuals, this is the definition, and it's a pretty broad definition. And I'm bringing it up not to dive into the details there, but it kind of shows you how programs had some flexibility to determine what populations would be important to reach to support housing stability in their jurisdictions. So basically, it's for groups of people whose ability to purchase or own a home has been impaired due to diminished access to credit or based on disparities in home ownership rates. So this could be racial, ethnic groups. It could be it could be those subjected to prejudice or cultural bias, those experiencing language barriers. It can include individuals who live in persistent poverty counties. So by and large, this participant-based approach allows HAF participants to, again, design their program to meet local needs. Next slide. Another part of the flexibility is determining the type of assistance that might be provided. While the most common form of assistance is in providing mortgage assistance, different programs identified a variety of other housing costs that could help keep homeowners stably housed, such as covering utilities, property taxes, HOA fees, home repair to maintain a home's habitability, etc. So and then also, importantly, up to 5% of funding could be used for counseling, education efforts, or legal services. So this is an area where Treasury has really encouraged participants to invest some of the funds to help support homeowners more holistically. They have the ability to determine the best way to use the funds, but this is something that we generally encourage as a good practice. In my work with broader emergency housing programs, we've really seen that the shock of the pandemic affects different households differently. Some people just needed a one-time boost to get back on track, but a lot of households that were already struggling or had more permanent shocks, which is especially pertinent to lower income households, many needed more support to address complex situations. And often these services, housing counseling, can really provide a bridge towards greater stability. And that is where that is really an important service that a lot of programs integrated into their programs. Next slide. So in addition to the guidance, which provides which outlines eligibility requirements, etc., we've provided a number of resources to help programs maximize the use of HAF funds. So this can look like promising practices, which you could see on our website. We have a bunch of them. And these are practices that seem to be helping support better outcomes on the ground. A lot of these are identified by emergency housing providers. This nice graphic shows the importance of taking a data-driven, learning-oriented approach to outreach, especially. So using data to assess the need, like looking at census tract data, et cetera, would they expect applications to come from? Identifying communities that would be that would be really important to reach, and identifying whether they need culturally or linguistically appropriate strategies, or maybe there's logistical strategies that need to be considered to effectively reach and serve those populations. Then programs would implement and assess the success of those efforts in order to inform the next round, right? So the best programs tend to take a learning-oriented approach towards identifying those who really could use the help. And you could imagine how this might be particularly helpful with older Americans, immigrant populations, low-income homeowners in manufactured housing, homeowners with disabilities, very specific cultural groups, and again, this can be a really powerful tool that many programs incorporated. We also have a number of resources developed. You can go back. I'm not quite done there. We have a number of resources developed to support a human-centered program design. I know that's very wonky, but the idea is to put the homeowner first in thinking about operations. And a good example of this is building out, for instance, just a questionnaire to help assess COVID impact, right? So some programs in emergency housing in general found that just asking people to identify COVID-19 impact could be very difficult, and people don't really know what that means, and they don't know how to explain it, and then it can cause a lot of churn and make the process take a long time. And by identifying some of those common impacts and incorporating that into the application, and listening to those impacts and adjusting to really reflect the population's the likely impacts that are out there, that can really help streamline the population, help people feel more comfortable filling out the application, and help reduce churn. So again, that's a good example of a learning approach that we encourage programs to do. And these are just a couple examples, but the larger point is that we've been really at Treasury consistently encouraging taking a learning approach, looking for ways to customize programs to local need, but also thinking about how to adjust and best serve over time. Okay, so next slide. So the results of this so far seem to be going fairly well, right? Currently, the various HAF programs are at different stages in their life cycles, but over half the funds have been used. Some HAF participants have stopped accepting new applications and are approaching closeout. In the past reporting periods, the data has shown that programs seem to be reaching higher proportions of economically vulnerable and traditionally underserved homeowners than previous federal mortgage assistance efforts. And so that suggests a trajectory of lessons learned from the past being implemented now. In leading HAF's implementation, the Treasury Department has helped states and localities find new ways to connect to historically underserved populations, including setting up programs that really think about culturally and linguistically relevant outreach, adjusting operations to reduce unduly burdensome application requirements, ensuring flexibility to meet local needs, and streamlining communications with servicers to get mortgages to support providing mortgage assistance. So all together, we've really combined these efforts for a strong. So far, it appears to be largely successful, but I think there's a lot to learn about still. Okay, next slide. So that segues into the learning agenda itself. I'm going to talk about how Treasury is then taking the opportunity to learn about what has happened in HAF to support future emergency housing programs. Next slide. So this is under a broader effort. The Evidence Act requires federal agencies to engage in collaboration and coordination to advance evidence building activities. So a critical way we do this is through the learning agenda, right? And in the Office of Capital Access, where it's the larger umbrella where emergency housing programs lie, we're evaluating the effectiveness of recovery programs overall, including how how did recovery funds stimulate an equitable economic recovery? How equitable was the impact of recovery funds on Americans most in need of assistance? What have we learned that can be applied to the development of future economic recovery programs? So it's part of a broader initiative. Next slide. So throughout the learning agenda, we identify equity as a core to the work on recovery programs. This slide illustrates that we don't view equity and positive outcomes as different things, but as more, but rather we want to examine whether programs are equitably improving outcomes for people. So our research work and the learning agenda are centrally focused on equity as an organizing principle. Next slide. And our desire to learn about effective and equitable implementation of our programs means that we're really interested in a variety of evaluation types, including impact evaluations, descriptive evaluations, process evaluations, and other forms of analysis that can help us learn about how administrators can better implement programs in the future. And an important part of that is building out, like, a broader conversation about learning from these programs and identifying different perspectives. All right, so next slide. And as we move through and work with different levels of researchers out there, we hope to become one repository of information that is built out there, where we would like to highlight outcomes related to these programs and just generally provide a mechanism to share to other emergency housing providers or people who work with recoveries in the future about ways to best serve various populations. All right, next slide. So I'm going to take you through the specific questions we're looking at related to HAF. Learning area number 1, next slide, is about the implementation of the HAF program. How did HAF structure, flexibilities, and state plan review process encourage approaches to assist homeowners? So I'm not going to go into the details of this. This is a little bit wonky, specific to the researchers, but in essence, this learning agenda area is designed to examine the systemic way and the degree to which Treasury's processes for reviewing plans from HAF participants and how the HAF plan program was developed, we're able to assist in supporting homeowners most in need of the assistance. So we're really interested in things that will inform future policymakers in developing programs like HAF to assist homeowners. And I think that this is, in particular, this question is an area where providing a variety of insights from key stakeholders like housing counselors is a really good opportunity. When you add all these perspectives together, it can give a really textured perspective of what's gone well, considerations for the future, and even topics for more rigorous evaluative studies by researchers, right? So this is all part of a conversation. And it's great that NHRC is interested in capturing some of these insights from housing counselors because of the unique perspective that housing counselors have with this program. So the second learning agenda has to do, I'm just going to go through the rest of these really quickly, but it's a near-term indicator of the outcomes of the program, which is how equitable the distribution of HAF funds were to homeowners most in need of assistance. As I mentioned before, so far the basic stats look reasonably good, but we were interested in finding out more about this, and it's a key question to really think about the effectiveness of the program. And next slide. When I talk about equity, I think it's important to let's see, next slide. There we are. When I talk about equity, I think it's important to note that the definition is actually pretty broad, and it includes a lot of lenses by which to approach the idea of equitable distribution. From a recovery perspective, it's been very important that these funds reach the people who are most vulnerable to economic downturns due to persistent poverty or inequality. And so broad housing stability and displacement can have a ripple effect across the housing ecosystem in particular. So looking to make sure the funds reach those most in need are very important, that these funds could best serve and help people stay in their homes. So, and ultimately that benefits everyone because it supports a more resilient economy. But again, there's a lot here that we can work with when thinking about equitable distribution and how these funds reach people who needed them. And last slide about the learning agenda. And then the third question we have is, how are HAF funds changing the housing stability of recipients of homeowners, right? And this is really the ultimate goal of HAF, was keeping homeowners stably housed. It requires longer term study, but we know that early data shows some promising midterm results, right? Foreclosure filings were well below historical averages in 2022. Previous mortgage assistance programs showed positive it was lower than foreclosure averages in 2022, and just generally had good housing stability results thus far. So we're continuing to think about this and think about ways to learn about it. And with that, that's just an overview of the HAF program and the learning agenda. So far, it seems that the flexibility of the HAF program has allowed states, territories, and tribes to respond to local needs. It's been important to meeting the objective, which has been a really important objective of the HAF program. And these flexibilities can also provide very different results and can provide us a lot of learning opportunities. So we're excited about stakeholders like housing counselors leaning into the broad effort to provide insights to support a broad ecosystem of learning about emergency housing programs. And I appreciate you all taking the time, allowing me the opportunity to talk to you about what we're interested in learning in. And I want to thank you all for the work that you've done to help people stay housed through what have been a very challenging couple of years. So with that, I will pass it back to Ellie.
Thanks, Vanessa. I know that you and Courtney have probably been seeing some of the stuff that's in the chat posted about the different states and the housing counselors' experiences. But I want to really encourage everybody, the people who put stuff in the chat and everybody else on the call, is to complete this survey. So Stacy Tutt from from National Housing Law Project is going to spend some time going over that survey and talking about a few other HAF related things. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands the importance of completing this survey. This is going to be information that we'll be able to compile and then give to the Treasury for them to use in everything that they're trying to figure out through the learning agenda. So Stacy Tutt is the Homeowner Assistance Fund coordinator and a senior staff attorney at National Housing Law Project. Her work focuses on national implementation of the Homeowners Assistance Fund, predatory lending, mortgage servicing, and energy efficiency housing finance. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stacy. I will point out Christy has put the link for the HAF feedback into the chat. You should all feel welcome to open it up and start filling it out while Stacy is going through it with you. And Stacy, I'll hand it to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Ellie. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you. I've seen your names in the chat. I think I've been on a number of calls with you. And I just want to start out by thanking all of you for your hard work working for our homeowners and also getting the word out, providing them with all this necessary support. And we are back here because, or we're here today. And why we're here today is because your input is so valuable. And we really do want to know from your experiences what has happened in and around the Homeowners Assistance Fund. As we heard from Treasury's presentation, there was a great deal of flexibility that states had in designing their programs. And we know from the chat, and as we've already seen in there, there were some states that were very successful and some other states that struggled. In fact, the first thing I wanted to go through with everyone before we turn our attention to the survey is looking at where our HAF programs sit right now. As many of you are aware, there are programs that have moved towards closure or suspended their programs and gone to a wait list. The slide that I'm sharing with you here right now is just the most up-to-date slide we have as to the status of the Homeowner Assistance Fund in the various states across the country. As you can see here, those gray states are programs that have closed. And so that means that they have believed that all their money has been distributed, and so they have closed their portals. None of the states have officially closed through the Treasury process at this point in time, but when we say closure in this context, we are referring to the closure of the portals or the applications being taken. Those states that are in kind of that pale blue color, I usually characterize it as, those are states that have maybe gone suspended, gone to a wait list, and are moving towards closure. New York has been that color for quite some time, but because they are a lean program, they do continue to keep themselves in that kind of suspended accepting wait list stage as they continue to monitor their funds and the availability of those funds for their homeowners. Other states such as Oregon has done a little bit more of a kind of phased approach to the funding. They have gone through several closures and then reopenings. And so that is why here we're seeing Oregon currently being reported as suspended or accepting for waitlist. But again, this just gives you a general idea of where we're at in the states. There are still a number of states that are open, though I do know California has announced that they will be closing soon. And so we're seeing more and more of that. And that is why we wanted to come to you and talk to you about this survey. Because as your states are moving towards closure, we want to try to memorialize and capture your experience working with those states and what it was like trying to help homeowners through that process. And just so you know, your input is just one part of all the information that we're trying to gather. We heard from Treasury about their efforts, their learning agenda. Treasury is also working with academic researchers on this. The National Housing Law Project is working on this as well. We're trying to gather as much data as we can. If you've ever attended our calls, you know I love data. I report out on the data. So all of this is hopefully going to be coming together to really give us a clear picture of what was most successful. What are the different policies or outreach or access policies that can be adopted in order to make this process easier for homeowners in the future. Because we did during the last foreclosure crisis, there was the hardest hit fund program, and we learned a great deal from that program, both on a national level of the thoughts of how to help homeowners in distress, but and a state level as well on how to administer those programs and learn from those lessons under that program. And it really did help to shape the HAF program that we had. Also, I think what's great about doing this research and that is that it can really be used to dispute misconceptions about our homeowners in these situations. I recall during the last foreclosure crisis, hearing so much that homeowners were strategically defaulting because they had negative equity in their homes. As someone who directly represented homeowners, the going in foreclosure, that was not my experience at all. But there was a lot of academic research that was published to indicate that that was the case. However, now, as they've gone back and reflected on the data, and actually evaluated what happened during that last crisis, they were now disputing that and stating that actually the reason why homeowners default is because of negative life events. I know all of you know that. That has been all of our experiences with this, but this is really where your input and providing this information is what changes those misconceptions and helps us develop good policies for the future. So it makes all of our jobs easier as we try to help struggling homeowners during challenging negative life events. Because as you know, I've seen in the chat and what people are talking about, our hope is that we can continue to advocate for more relief for our homeowners and design it in such a way that it gets out to those who most need it and are most vulnerable and at risk in this situation. So with all that being said, hopefully I have you all excited about getting to answer a survey. I know it's not usually something that happens, but I hope by hearing the importance of this, that you will take the time to go through this survey. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to please pull up the survey, and go ahead, and you can even go along with me here and fill this out as I'm taking you through it and what it is that we are looking at. And I see we already have it completed. Yay, I love it. Multitaskers and what you're doing. This is really great. So, but I'm gonna, like I said, for those who haven't yet, I'm gonna share my screen with you so I can just take you through this survey and you can see some of the questions that are here. So as we look at this is our introduction to this. There's also a link to the recovery learning agenda. In addition to that, this part is really just a chance to add in your information. You can see I've added it in here, my own information, and then you can go ahead and go on to the next screen to get into some more of the particulars. Now, with question number 7 here, we are asking you in what states your organization provided HAF services. Now, we know that some of your organizations may have helped homeowners in a number of different states. So when answering this question, you can go ahead and click as many states as apply to answer that question. And then in question number 8, what we're asking you here to do is pick one of those states that you worked in to provide us feedback on that particular state. In addition to that, we would be asking you that if you did help homeowners in more than one state, please fill out more than one survey and do a survey for each state that you provided assistance in. Again, I think that's invaluable to have that information from you, especially because you get the sense of what was happening and can do this comparison between them. And so your input, I know it's extra work and it's extra time, but your input really, I think, is invaluable in this process because you probably will catch things that otherwise might not be thought of because of your experience working within different states and seeing those differences within the programs. And so next on this, and I know this looks long, but we tried to make it easy with little buttons to click and things like that. So it'll hopefully go through rather quickly for you as you're filling it out. And then we start asking you some more just specifics about the program that we think kind of align with Treasury's learning agenda as well as our own and the information we're hoping to learn from this program as we continue to work and try to help homeowners through these circumstances. And so we wanted to know if you had a contract with the state's HAF program in order to provide services. We know in some states there was, and other states there was not. We also wanted to know if you received funding. Again, if you receive funding, we want to know how that funding was received. I think this is really helpful to inform states of how this works and the different options in the funding that is provided. We also know that some of you utilized other funding for this and that not all HAF plans provided funding to housing counselors. So this is why we're asking questions in and around this area, because we think it's important to know how you worked with states and what support was provided to your organizations in order to provide the invaluable counseling that you did. Now then we get into a little bit more about what worked and didn't work within your programs. And so in this case, for question number 12, you are welcome to click as many of the boxes as you want as to what went well with the program. We want to hear good as well as bad, because again, those would be positive, promising practices that we may want to use in the future. And then the next question allows you to kind of express more what you think were some of the barriers in that program. Are there things that made it challenging for our homeowners to participate? Such as, was there excessive or burdensome document requirements that they had to do? Did the state say that a homeowner in bankruptcy was not eligible for the program, or that the heirs were required to show some additional documentation that made it challenging for them? Whatever you think here in this, we would love to know. And in fact, we even gave you an other where you can write in any other thoughts you had on what were barriers to your programs. We do want to know too, and this is here in question number 14, that if you had homeowners who didn't qualify for the program, we want to know what it was. Again, as we saw in Treasury's presentation, what kinds of benefits were provided varied greatly from state to state. So this could really help to show that maybe there was a need out there that wasn't met by HAF, and maybe might be a consideration for the future of ensuring that that kind of assistance will be available the next time. We also want to know about how you were able to work with or communicate with the administrators with the HAF programs. And one thing that we did here in the past and with our work in this area is really the importance of allowing third parties like yourselves to be able to submit applications on behalf of homeowners. Again, this was really important for our particularly vulnerable populations like our older adults. And so we just want to know if you had that ability. And then we want to hear more about what happened in those follow-up communications with the HAF administrators. It's important to us to know here too if there were any kind of deadlines that homeowners had to go through, what those deadlines were. So we just have a better sense again of the various policies that were out there and how they were applied as we look at the other data. We also want to know what other languages that HAF administrators provided follow-up communications. We have been able, from a lot of sources, gather what a lot of what language access was available, but this is a challenging question for us, and you all know this better than we do, which is why we're asking this question here. And then we also want to know if a homeowner was denied, was there an appeals process that was available? And we'd like, if you went through the appeals process with a homeowner, to get your perspective and to kind of rate that appeals process for us, so we can get a sense of what it was like to go through it and those experiences of homeowners. And then next we have here, we want to get a sense of how it was working with the mortgage servicers in this program. We know that many of you were having direct contact with them, trying to navigate it with the mortgage servicers as much as you were with the administrators. So this is again a chance for us to get some feedback on how that went for you and any concerns you had. With number 22, this one is that we want to know how effective it was to escalate problems to the mortgage servicers whenever there were issues with a HAF application or getting a response on an application. And so we want to know how that worked with the mortgage servicers. Another important question is if you're aware of any homeowners that were foreclosed upon while their application was pending. We'd like to know if you think that there were certain populations that didn't submit applications or have access to this. And then we've given you a chance to provide an explanation here. I typed in a small example of what that explanation could look like, but really we just want to hear from you and didn't want to limit you too much in what you could say in response to that question. And then we also have a box here where you can say whatever you want, and I will take it. So all those interesting comments in the chat or different things like that, please feel free to add them into this section. Put whatever you'd like in there. We really just want to hear from you. And if I haven't stressed that enough, the last question does, because our last question on this is if you're willing to participate in a follow-up interview, because we do hope in the future we may be able to do either some interviews or focus groups to dive into this. And I see from the chat, maybe a focus group just on Florida is going to be a good idea for us to do, so we can hear a lot more about that and your direct experiences with it. So again, I just want to I'm going to stop sharing my screen now since we've gotten through the survey here. And I do just want to say to everyone how much we appreciate your taking the time to do this, how much we value your experiences, and really want to make sure we're capturing it now while all of this is still happening, so we can look back and reflect on this and hopefully pull the best from HAF for use in the future. So thank you all so much. And I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Ellie Pepper.
Thanks so much, Stacy. So we are heading into the Q&A portion. I'm going to pause the recording. And hand it back to Bruce.